Lions are in the balance. Their future is far from certain. I wanted to introduce to you today some of the major themes that my research has been addressing over the last few decades. We'll look at basic science, why it is lions have manes, why they live in groups. The fact that lions are awful annoyances. They're dangerous. You don't want them in your backyard. And they're the subject of commercial interests who don't always act in ways that would maximize their chances of surviving. I've headed the Serengeti Lion Project for some time. It's one of the longest continuous projects of any animal species anywhere in the world. It was started in 1966 by George Schaller. He was followed by a British scientist, Brian Bertram, a British-American couple in the mid-70s, and I took it over in 1978, and I've been working on this population ever since. I have a team that are currently in the Serengeti, a Tanzanian, Stan, 2 Swedes, as it happens, Ingela and Daniel, and an American graduate student from the University of Minnesota, Ali Swanson. I want to start out with the basic research, because that's what took me over there in the first place. So I want to talk about science of the lions. One of the things that's very conspicuous about lions is their social system is so different from that of other cats. The males also have these weird ornaments that they carry around all the time. And they also have a certain place in the environment, none of which are really that well understood until we started our own research. If you think about cats, you're likely to think of things like leopards, jaguars, tigers. They're all solitary animals. They're not very friendly to each other. But if you think about lions, you think of a group. Lions are the only social cat, completely different from all their closest relatives. Now, people often think that, oh, that must be well understood. Yes, it's because lions hunt together in groups. But in fact, it's not that easy. Lions will sometimes hunt together, but the problem is for this female who's about to catch this wildebeest calf, that second female may help her a little bit, but mostly she's another hungry mouth to feed. So per capita, it's not necessarily a good thing to be hunting in a group. So we've studied this in considerable detail, and we have found, yes, there are times when they do cooperate, like males when they try to catch buffalo. It's really difficult to do that on your own. But very commonly, you'll have a group of lions. One of them spots a prey animal that's fairly easy to catch, and the others sort of think that's a good deal. Hey, look, she's about to catch it. Go, go, okay? And there's a lot less cooperation than you might think. So this is not, in fact, why lions are social at all. What's very striking, once you get to know these animals, is how incredibly careful they are at keeping their own territories safe and secure and keeping strangers out. Here we have 4 females who've encountered a stranger in their territory, and there's no messing about here. They're very cooperative, very organized. Doesn't have a chance. And this is the way most lions die. So the thing that's really striking about lions is that they do this as a group. And it's very fundamental to their perceptions of themselves and their surroundings. And we can address this experimentally because lions like to roar. I'm going to play you now a lion's roar, hopefully. That's a single female roaring. And we can record these roars, and we can play them back to real groups of lions to see what they do. So if we have a single stranger who's apparently now had the audacity to invade the home turf of the hometown team here, we see that their likelihood of responding depends on how big their own group size is. So if we play a stranger's roar to a single female, she's not likely to respond. But if there's 2 of them together, pretty well, if they outnumber the invader 3-1, then they almost always go. Okay? So they're approaching what's a potentially dangerous invasion when they safely outnumber their opponents. What's really cool is if we play the recording of 3 females, yikes. That's a lot more intimidating. Now, our group of 3, who were pretty comfortable trying to check out the lone stranger, if there's 3 of us against 3 of them, that's not such a good thing. But if there's 4 of us against 3 of them, that's about like 2 against 1. If there's 5 of us against 3 of them, that's about like 3 against 1, which means the lions can count. They can count. It's a surprise, isn't it? I do often think of lions as just big, dumb blondes, but they're forever surprising me, you know? And so they can count the number of us and the number of them, and they act accordingly. When they can safely outnumber their opponents, they're very much going to try to chase them away. Now, the key thing about lions is their habitat. So the lions are the dominant large big cat of the open savannas in Africa. And the thing about the African savanna is that a lion which has to ambush its prey, there's only a few spots on the landscape where they're likely to be successful in catching anything. Okay? So there's only a few key areas where they're going to have any chance of catching their prey, and that's typically along the rivers. Okay? Now, if we take all the long-term data that has been collected on this population for the last 40 years, every time we find the lions, we note down where they are, we keep track of each individual, we know how many babies they have, how the babies survive, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing a very detailed demographic study. And we can create what's in a sense a lion real estate map. So this is an approximately 2,000 square kilometer area in the middle of Serengeti National Park where we've been watching the lions. And there's certain places where lions live that they really frequently produce cubs. And they're going to produce surviving offspring, and those are the ones that are populating the future generations. Other places are pretty miserable. What defines a good area as opposed to a bad area are these rivers, but in particular, it's where tributaries of rivers meet. It's the confluences. Those, in a way, act like funnels. The prey, a wildebeest is pretty stupid. There's no doubt. Zebra's a little bit smarter, not much. But they know, even the dumbest of these dumb brutes know that lions like to hang along the rivers. And so I reached the river. I don't want to cross. There might be lions. I reach the river. There's another tributary coming in over here. Oops, I'm at a confluence. And so that's where the lions wait, okay? Mouths open. So these confluences provide them with food. There's more vegetation along there. And the water tends to persist longer. It's scoured out more by the turbulence of the streams where the confluences meet. So it's got the 3 things lions really want. Okay? And what we find is that those large prides, those 5 against 3, the 3 against 1, what they really want to do is to keep out other females from those high-value real estate areas. And the large groups are successful at doing this, whereas the smaller prides are pushed out into these really miserable places like out here. So think about lions and you think about a gang. It's gang warfare all the time. Now, let's put this back in the context of the big cats. We've got our solitary cats on the left, lions on the right. And these solitary species typically live in forests, okay, much more evenly distributed kind of habitat where there might be food any old where. Whereas the lions are the ones in the savanna. We just have these certain hot spots where food is going to come to them. The other thing that's interesting about these different species is that these are typically fairly rare. Where lions exist, these savannas support tons of meat for the lions to eat. So the lions can achieve very high densities. Now, one of the cool things about doing science in the 21st century is that when you have some ideas that you can state relatively clearly, mathematically, you can put together a computer simulation. And so you can make a virtual Serengeti, and you can have virtual lion prides, and even better is you can have a virtual ancestor to the lion that's a solitary species, just like leopards and jaguars and all these others. And you can imagine in your silicon landscape that there's some places that are really worth protecting against strangers, and others that are pretty miserable, okay? And so then, if you have talented graduate students like I do, you can do the computer simulations. Let me tell you what's going on here. So this is the landscape that's really high value. Imagine that it's having a lot of river confluences, the food's coming in. These are miserable open plains in the middle. And then each one of these blue things is a territory of a kind of pre-lion ancestor. So it's a solitary female. And once her daughters grow up, she won't let them stay. They don't want to stay, and they all stay solitary. But we allow in this a mutation. And we give that the yellow, and that's a social mutant, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to start this off, and the whole world is leopard-like, but we're going to put them in a habitat that leopards don't usually live in like lions do, okay? So we let this thing run, and the bigger group, of course, can go and dominate those hot spots, and they start having successful reproduction. Their pride gets bigger. Then they start sending out propagules of daughters. Those daughters migrate to the other hot spots. They're producing more propagules, okay? And so what we have then is an evolutionary process, generation after generation. That solitary ancestral state is replaced with social descendants, as long as the habitat has this kind of characteristic. And so we run these models all the time, or we did, for some time, and we could look at all the different permutations, different kinds of landscapes, and we found that, yes, actually high population density does matter, because the more strangers you have to fight against, the more useful it is to have a partner. And then those savanna landscapes, you have these hot spots that you need. So this is a nasty graph, but basically this area down here is where population density would be really low, and there aren't any real hot spots. So that's the forest. So that's where leopards, jaguars, and tigers live. And lions live in areas with these higher population densities. They have these hot spots. And where it's really, really black, that's where sociality will almost always evolve. So that's why lions, unlike the other cats, are social. So now, I want to ask the other curious thing that's so immediately obvious about lions. Why is it that the male is carrying around this ridiculous, absurd, ludicrous, heavy fur coat? This ain't Chicago in November. This ain't Minnesota in April. This is the Serengeti, and it's hot. What's he doing? Okay? Well, again, one of the great advantages of doing science in the 21st century is you have access to incredibly sophisticated techniques, amazing equipment you couldn't imagine. So we used life-size toy lions. And we gave them fake manes, okay? We brought up 4 life-size toy lions, and we're going to show these to the lions, okay? And we're going to see what they think about them. And so we vary the length and the color of the mane. So our short mane male, he's Lothario. Our little black mane male is Romeo. Blonde, long blonde. Okay? And then the long black mane is Julio, okay? So we're going to set these out 2 at a time and give the lions a choice so they can tell us what they think about them. So first, this is a female who's actually in heat. She's very eager to meet one of these gentlemen who's suddenly appeared in her range. This is better than Match.com. So here she is. She's waving her tail around. There's Fabio over there, okay? Nah. Nah. Julio. Oh my God. Okay. She can't quite understand why he's just standing there. That's not happened to her before. But she adores him, okay? Just do something. Okay? She makes her choice. So we did this repeatedly, and the females adore those black maned males. Give them a choice between a black maned male and a blonde maned male. It's the black maned male every time. Just about. 9 out of 10 times. They really like the dark maned male. Now we did the same sort of thing, putting out 2 dummies at a time to male lions. Okay? Now before I start, please, you may be tempted to dismiss this male. You might question his courage. He is not the lion from the Wizard of Oz. This is a real lion, okay? Males form gangs as well, okay? And the larger group of males will kill the members of a smaller coalition. So as far as he knows, can we turn down that light? As far as we know, as far as he knows, he's outnumbered 2 to 1, and he could get killed, okay? So trust me, this is as brave as you'll ever see a male lion being, okay? I'm telling you, he's being courageous, okay? He's so brave. See, you're laughing at him. He's outnumbered 2 to 1. Come on, they could kill him, okay? We had to edit that. That was about 3 minutes between 2 steps before and now, okay? So he finally makes his choice, okay? Now, in contrast, oh wait, you're not real. In contrast to the females who really adored those black maned males, the males avoid the dark maned male. That's really too scary, okay? They go and check out the blonde male instead of the black maned male. So, one of the things that I want you to think about is that the mane is not like hair color in humans, okay? We have blondes, we have brunettes, we have redheads, etc. And in the lion world, the mane can actually change color. So this is a male that's 7 years of age when he's fairly blonde, but by the time he's 8, he's pretty dark. And we've also had males go the other way. They could be fairly dark at a youngish age, and then they get blonder as they get older. And what's really interesting about this, then, is that the mane is actually indicating, it reveals the male's physical condition. So the other lions can look at that guy and say, oh, well, you're in good shape, according to the color of your mane, okay? So what is so hot about a dark mane, okay? We got blondie on the left, we got a dark mane male on the right. What's the difference between these 2 kinds of males? Well, the guy on the right has much more testosterone, okay? So that's going to make him much more aggressive. He's got a lot happening there. It also turns out when we measure the mane hair that these are quite thin, fine hairs, and these are much coarser and thicker, okay? Now, this means this guy is not only wearing a parka, but it's a really thick, heavy parka, okay? So we used infrared photography to actually measure the body temperature of the males, whether they were blonde or dark, and the dark maned males have much higher body temperature. So they really are literally hot. They're overheating. But that's the point. They're actually showing off. I can take the heat. If you've ever been to Africa, if you've ever seen lions, the first thing they do is they start panting. They're so freaking hot the whole time. Well, this guy's saying, I can do this. I can take the heat. And it's therefore an actually really good way to tell the females, I can make it. Okay, I'll be a good mate. They're more likely to survive a wound if they're attacked by another lion. They have a much longer pride tenure. One of the key things here, and I'll come back to this briefly later, about the lion pride is you have the group of females that defend those confluences, the hot spots. You have the males that come in, they mate with the females, and as long as they can stay with those females, they'll protect their own cubs. But if they get replaced by a new set of males, the new males will come in and kill all the offspring. Females don't much care for that, so they don't want to waste time on a set of cubs that would be doomed to be killed in a year or so. And so, in fact, if they choose the dark maned males, they do, in fact, get higher cub survival. So females are making a very important choice that will tell them, yes, this guy's got a black maned male, he's going to stick around, he'll be able to survive all the combat with other males, And I'll raise, my cubs that we have will then survive. Okay, so the third thing is much newer. This is a project we've only just started in the last couple of years. And we're now interested in looking at the lions in the context of the much broader ecosystem, not just lions with lions. We want to know what the lion's role is within all the food web and other aspects of the larger ecosystem. Now, I work in the Serengeti, which conveniently is about the same size as Chicagoland. That's your point of reference, okay? You got that county over there in Indiana and those up in Wisconsin, all the way around. That's about 30,000 square kilometers. So that's a kind of area in which you'd be thinking about. And that's a big area, okay? And we want to know what kind of impacts the lions are having on all the other species in that big of an area. And there's 200,000 zebra, almost 500,000 gazelle, over 1 million wildebeest, and they're moving around all this whole big area. They live in herds. Sometimes they're in small herds. Sometimes they're all aggregated into huge herds. So if we want to think about the lions and what they're getting to eat, we're going to be asking how much food is available in, say, a set of confluences in this part of Chicagoland as opposed to some other part, up in Evanston, okay? How can we keep track of that? That's really, really hard. So beginning a couple of years ago, we started a camera trap survey where we put cameras that have a motion detector, they're heat-sensitive motion detectors, so if a live animal walks in front, it takes its picture. We've now set up the largest camera trap survey anywhere in the world. It's been going day and night now for over 3 years. 225 camera traps in about half of our lion study area, about 1,000 square kilometers. And it's great, okay? We get all these amazing pictures. They're taken by the cameras automatically, day and night. Wildebeest as they come and go, the zebra as they move through our study area. We get handsome portraits of animals like this, the spotted hyena. We also get curious animals like this cheetah checking us out. And so it turned out to be such an amazing way to collect portraits of all these animals. It was actually too successful. 225 camera traps. You've got gazillions of animals wandering around that area. We are generating over 1 million photographs every year. And that's a lot of work. I got to look at another 957,000 pictures this week. It's really hard. So we've turned to citizen science. And so like your Adler Planetarium here in Chicago, which is one of the founding members of Zooniverse, we've started a citizen science project we call Snapshot Serengeti, where you can go online, and I'll tell you how at the end of the talk, and you can actually look at the pictures, and you can be maybe the first person to look at a particular picture and see what the animal is, and you tell us. And so we have our volunteers have gone through millions of pictures now and have told us what they've seen. Millions of pictures, okay? So this has required a lot of work. So again, my graduate students, Margaret Kosmal and Ali Swanson, set up Snapshot Serengeti, and we rely on these online volunteers to view each photograph, classify the animals, and count them, okay? And so it's been an amazing success. We started this in the middle of December, and since December we've had 160,000 people go online to help look at the pictures, and they've done over 10 million classifications. It's really been fabulous. So we don't have much to report on this yet because this is still pretty new, and we only got these results out just in the last few months. But just to give you an indication, in the first couple of years of the camera traps, we got pictures of over 500 cheetah, about 100 leopard, thousands of lions, thousands of spotted hyenas. And so we already have the long-term lion project where we have radio collars, we follow the lions every day so we can show where the lions were hanging out. And we use the camera traps to see where the hyenas were with respect to the lions. Likewise, we can do it with the leopards. So we can sort of see how these different species manage to coexist with a much larger carnivore that would really like to kill them if they could catch them. So the challenge is how do hyenas manage to survive in the neighborhood of these dangerous lions? So we're using the camera traps to address that. We're also looking at predator-prey relations. We get lots of pictures of herbivores. Some species reside in the range of our study area, the lion study area, all year round. So we have thousands of pictures of buffalo, giraffe, hartebeest, warthog, and then the migrants that come through. So over 60,000 pictures of wildebeest, lots of zebra, etc. And so here, we're getting so many pictures, we can actually look to see how they distribute themselves each month, and this helps you to get a better sense of the Serengeti, and it's a great way to actually have a formal representation of this scientifically. So here, these dots are where we have the camera traps, and the top row is 2010, the second row is 2011, and we're just looking at the end of the dry season, September, October, November. Right now in Tanzania, it should start raining in the next couple of weeks and should start turning green. But in 2010, the rains failed in November, so it stayed dry. This is now a satellite picture of what the vegetation is doing. Browner now means brown vegetation, and green is green vegetation. And so the hartebeest is just one of these resident species, just sort of stays around, doesn't move very much. The following year, when the rains came pretty much on schedule, it didn't really affect their movements that much. So that's resident species. But here we have the wildebeest, supreme migrating species. First year it was so dry, the wildebeest didn't come into our study area at all. September, October, it's starting to get a little bit of green there. A few wildebeest show up and whomp. Hundreds of thousands of wildebeest are in the study area in November. So the thing that I want to do now is actually be an advocate for this project and tell you, you should do this too. This is fun. You'll like it. Okay? We get emails every now and then from somebody complaining, I can't quit. And we're thinking, well, given all the other things you get addicted to on the internet, that's not so bad. You know? And also, as we're going forward, we're enabling people to play around with the data. Okay? And it's really fantastic as people start to see these bigger pictures of how the animals are moving around from the camera trap survey. And especially, it's something we're now using in our educational programs up in Minnesota. We have a grant with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute that is seeking to give undergraduates authentic research experience. And this is great, because ever since I went to Minnesota in the 1980s, I've had all these starry-eyed undergraduates say, can I help? Thinking that I'm going to send them to the Serengeti. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I can't. It's a long way away. It's expensive. But now people can say, how can we help? We say, yes, you can help. In fact, we need as many people helping as possible. So in a couple of our courses being taught up in Minnesota right now, the students, and these are freshmen, are being taught some basic ideas about food webs. They then read scientific papers about how species might avoid each other if it's predators and prey. And then they go online, and they learn how to identify wildebeest, zebra, warthog, all these other things, make their classifications, and it joins the whole big pool of photographs that have been identified by all of our volunteers. And so then I have a postdoc in Minnesota who's working with the students, so they then learn for themselves how to visualize the data. And they can take all the wildebeest sightings from a particular month, and the wildebeest are here when the blue, maybe a few weeks later, they move to the northeast, and those are the red dots, so they can see the migration. There are certain times of day when the pictures are being taken, so certain species are active in the day, other species are only active at night, etc. So there's things that people can do. And we're having the students ask their own questions, so that really it's they who come up with the research question and they try to address it. And it's been really fun because the students get so addicted to it as well. And so just as a cute comment here, this is from one of our introductory biology classes, just the last few weeks. She's from the College of Design. Being a design student, art has always been a stronger subject than science. With this lab, I realized the two are very similar. The process of discovery is the same. And even science takes creativity. Who knew? Okay. Amazing. Okay, that's the fun part of this talk. And alas, I have to change directions. I have to switch gears. Because even though the Serengeti is one of the best protected national parks in Africa, it's not perfectly protected. And the lions are not exactly doing great. Lions are in the balance. The direction is downwards right now. This was brought to mind just a few years ago when Ingela, one of my Swedish graduate students, was out in the southeastern part of our Serengeti study area, and she saw this group of men leaving in a hurry. She was wondering what was going on. She was radio tracking a lion. She heard the beeps from the radio collar. She went over to the radio collared lion, and there it was. It's dead. It had its ears chopped off. Its paws had taken off. She was able to confirm it was one of our study animals. The collar was also gone, by the way. Each animal in our study, we have a little cartoon drawing that shows patterns of their whisker spots, ear notches. This animal's ears were missing, but the spots matched perfectly, so we knew who it was. Why would they kill the lion? Well, they're motivated. Lions kill livestock. In this part of the park, the lions are not in those good prey-rich confluences. These are the ones that have been shoved out to the edge, and sometimes they resort to eating livestock. And they get killed in retaliation. So, I'm afraid my research has had a much more conservation thrust in the last decade or so, and it's not been nearly as much fun as playing with toys and writing computer simulations. This is a map showing the estimated remaining distribution of lions across Africa. Best guess is there's about 30,000 lions left, and they occupy only about 18% of their historic range. The savannas have been converted to agriculture. They've been lost to people. Now, in these countries that lions still live, one is exceptionally important, Tanzania. Tanzania, it's estimated, is home to half the remaining lions in Africa. It would be very difficult to be working in Tanzania and not get worried about conservation. So, I'm now going to talk about several components of the conservation research. First is the fact that lions are so annoying and so dangerous, and they cause a lot of damage. Here, we think of lions very differently. There's a lot of organizations that think lions should be so easy to conserve. Everybody loves lions. I mean, there's a cowardly lion, Dances with Dorothy. There's a lion king who's really cuddly. Kids love lions. They make nice toys. Even disgraced ex-athletes. Okay? But you go to Africa, where lions live, where lions are abundant, and you get a very different picture. The lion is something to be destroyed. The lion is something that needs to be removed. Lions are one of the most hated species in Africa. Lions should all be dead. Okay? Well, as I mentioned, lions eat livestock. And a lot of pastoralist people rely on their livestock for their livelihoods. But even more disturbing is that lions eat people. In a 15-year period from 1990 to 2004, we know that lions attacked about 900 people in southern Tanzania. They killed 2/3 of those. Okay? And I've done some research down in these areas. Here's a signpost near a village commemorating, finally, the death of a man-eating lion. So, Simba Mlawatu, Amekula Watu, that's saying that this is a lion that has eaten 40 people. Okay? When that lion was finally killed, there were celebrations for miles around. Of course there would be celebrations. That was a horrible, dangerous animal. Now, I want to emphasize, because a Western audience needs to understand why lions are so hated in Africa. In this part of Africa, where we have these man-eating attacks, they're doing it for food. This gentleman is describing about how his wife was giving their grandchild a bucket bath in the front of their little hut. And she'd been washing off the baby like this, and then she reached up to dry off the baby, and as she reached up, a lion came and grabbed the child, ran off 50 meters and ate it. This woman is telling me how She was walking back from her neighbor's hut. It was a 30-meter walk in the evening. She paused for a moment. Her 5-year-old son was grabbed by a lion, like this. She leapt up, she screamed, chased the lion away. The lion dropped her son, but its throat, its upper chest had been crushed, and he died later that night. So people hate lions, with good reason. Now, I first want to just say one thing about the pattern of attacks by man-eating lions. It turns out that it's a very predictable thing in some ways in terms of the phase of the moon. Lions have much better night vision than we do, okay? But during the full moon, the air is so clear out there that even we can see pretty well in the dark, okay? But when the moon is not up and the moon is not bright, that's when their night vision gives them a tremendous advantage. They can still see as clearly under these circumstances as we can during the full moon. Now, in these areas where there's a lot of man-eating, people are only active between sunset and about 10 o'clock at night, okay? And almost all the lion attacks are at night, okay? People are only out in the evening. And so there's a very striking relationship with moon phase. And the key dividing line here is the full moon, okay? So prior to the full moon, the moon is already up when the sun sets, okay? And as the moon gets brighter in the evening, all this time the moon is up above the horizon at sunset, okay? And as the moon gets brighter, the lions, they're not the masters of darkness now, okay? They can't get their prey, which is us. But after the full moon, the moon doesn't rise for first an hour after sunset, then 2 hours after sunset. And the lions may not have fed much before the full moon because their prey could see them. So they're hungry, and in those hours of darkness, right after sunset, now the human prey is still out there. They can see us, we can't see them. And the chance of being attacked more than triples right after the full moon. So it's tempting to think that when we see the full moon, this may be a reflection that all of us, or at least ancestrally, lived in areas where there were dangerous nocturnal predators. The full moon itself is the safest night because the moon is so bright. But it's like a caution. After tonight, that's when it gets really scary. Okay, so where are these man-eaters? Most of the man-eaters in Tanzania are right down along the southern coast. So here's the Serengeti up here. Dar es Salaam, the capital, is over here somewhere. Mozambique is down here. And there's this coastal area where there have been hundreds of attacks, okay? We look to see why certain areas have more attacks than others. There's hardly any attacks up here, through here. Why is that? Well, it turns out that lion attacks mostly take place in districts where the zebra, the wildebeest, the things that lions usually like to eat have pretty much disappeared. But they're also, these same districts have tons of bush pigs. Bush pigs are nocturnal crop pests, okay? These thrive in agricultural areas. They're really difficult to control, okay? So, sadly for the people, they're subsistence farmers. They have to grow all their food for the next year, and they cannot risk losing their crops to bush pigs, so they protect their crops by sleeping in the fields. And the lions, of course, are following the pigs. So that's the link. Lots of bush pigs, lions coming to where there are people, lots of man-eating. So we've tried some experiments down there to see what could be done to control bush pigs. You can't eradicate them. They breed like pigs. And it's amazing to me that in this area where there's been agriculture, presumably almost since the invention of agriculture, people don't do anything to fence their crops. So we did a series of experiments where we put in simple barriers to keep the bush pigs out of people's fields. We also dug some trenches around people's fields. I love the way that some of the Tanzanians describe it is that, well, yeah, these trenches keep the pigs out because they've got such short little legs they can't jump. And it works, okay? So when we put up fences and trenches, it turns out that, yeah, that protects the crops. And this control is where it's just the way they're usually doing things. And there's a lot of damage that these pigs cause. And this is why people sleep in their fields, even though there are risks of man-eating lions out there. Now, one of the things that was kind of encouraging to us when we did this work was that people saw that these fences worked, and they started building their own, okay? We thought, oh, that's pretty good. So after the first year or so, they added about 1.5 kilometers of fencing to protect their fields against the pigs. But the problem is vast. You need 20,000 kilometers of fencing, okay? So it's absolutely nothing. Setting this up, unless there's a mechanism to expand it, to scale it up. So instead of just a few fields with a few kilometers of fences, you need tens of thousands. Okay, sport hunting. Sport hunting is a big deal in some countries, particularly Tanzania. Tanzania has set aside an area almost the size of Oregon for trophy hunting, okay? And the primary draw for the sport hunters is African lions, okay? Now, the problem with shooting lions is that a lion male is a family member most of the time, okay? He has to stick around and protect his cubs against other males. Remember I mentioned before that if there's a replacement, the new males will be infanticidal and kill the cubs. So the resident males have to stick around, okay? Replacement males are a huge threat. Now, a male lion reaches maturity at about 4 years of age, and he then needs to stick around for the next 2 years to safely raise his offspring. He can't leave, okay? So if you're going to shoot a male, a simple rule of thumb would be let these young males start their families, give them enough time to raise their first brood of offspring, and if you're going to shoot them then. And then the females can mate with brand new husbands, start the whole thing over again, okay? That would be how you'd harvest them. So we decided that the real key thing to tell people was age. There's a minimum age that you should shoot lions, okay? And so one of my other graduate students and I wrote a little book trying to engage the hunting industry, saying, hey, only shoot older males, that would be good, okay? And then you could maximize your crops because you won't have unintended consequences of shooting fathers, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had this guide. Here's some pictures of it. This is the same male when he's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You see how his mane gets bigger. There are other aspects that change with age. And we're really trying to focus people's attention on these 6-year-old males. That's the trophy male. Don't shoot anything younger than that, okay? The problem is that sport hunting is so poorly regulated that in fact a quota is not so much a limit, it's more of a production target. The government gets money by selling dead lions, so you're not shooting enough, shoot more, okay? And of course, the companies are very happy to shoot as many lions as they can. In order to get as many lions as they can, they shoot these. So these are, believe it or not, trophy male lions, okay, shot in the last few years. And the problem with shooting animals this young, if we do, again, one of our computer simulations, here's a population that if there was no hunting, so there was no offtake, there'd usually be about 75 females in there. If you allow trophy hunting of these older males, that suppresses the population a little bit, but not much, no matter how many 6-year-old males you shoot, okay? But if you include these really young males like this, you're getting so much social disruption. The male's only long enough in a pride to get the females pregnant. He's shot. The next male comes along, kills the cubs, mates the female, gets her pregnant. He's shot, and the population can go into decline. Okay? Well, we've actually documented this has been going on. There has been overhunting. And despite the best efforts of a lot of these African countries to shoot as many lions as they possibly can, harvests have peaked. It was like peak offtake back in the 90s in some places, in the 80s in others. It's been going down despite the best efforts to shoot as many lions as they can. Now, I've taken that data, and it's allowed me to actually estimate, well, this is what bad hunting looks like. Are there areas where hunting has been sustainable? And the answer is yes, there are a few places. And where quotas are small, maybe a lion or less per 1,000 square kilometers of hunting reserve, it doesn't have much of an impact. But harvests sometimes were much, much higher than that, 10 to 20 times as high as they should have been, okay? And they could only sustain these really high offtakes because they had to shoot. All the old males are gone, and they're just gone down and shooting the young ones to find anything they can kill. So, in 2010, the Tanzanian parliament was actually concerned about the future of lion hunting. Trophy hunting was a big deal to them. And so they officially passed a law that restricted the harvest of males to 6 years of age. And so if you're going to shoot lions, wait till they're old and grotty like this, okay? Remove these old things, okay? Leave everybody else alone. Unfortunately, the law has never been enforced. Like many other well-intended regulations in Africa, this one has never been enforced. I started saying, well, you know, it would be a good idea to enforce your own laws on this because in the long term, you'd have much more lion exports if you didn't overhunt. So, a few months ago, the Tanzanian government responded by withholding my research clearance. After 35 years on the lion project, I no longer have research clearance to work there. And the reason is I was trying to sabotage the Tanzanian hunting industry. Okay, so much for Tanzania. Let's take a really big picture. What is it going to take to conserve this very dangerous, this commercially very valuable species? I apologize for this. I thought about changing this, but too bad, you're going to have to suffer. This is a lot of different populations of lions. And some of these are in West Africa, that's in Benin, there's Botswana, Cameroon, Ghana, here's some in Kenya, Tanzania. And what I want you to see on these, I hope you can see, is that for each graph, there's a red line, okay, a red horizontal line. And that is because in lions, you can estimate how many lions there should be depending on how much food there is for the lions to eat. It's a pyramid, you have a lot of grass and you have a lot of herbivores, and you go up to the top predators and it goes down about 10% per step. You can do that with the lions very precisely and predict how many lions there should be. So then we said, okay, how close is the population to that predicted? What's the status of the population? And in places like Benin, Cameroon, the short answer is dreadful. There are very few lions. And if we look at the population trends in Botswana and these two places, they weren't so bad 10 or 15 years ago, but they're declining really rapidly. And these are on a logarithmic scale, by the way. So these are really fast drops, okay? But then there are places like this. Here's a bunch of places in South Africa, Zimbabwe, where there's the population right on the red line, okay? They're doing pretty well, okay? So, why do some lion populations thrive while others fade? Here's a successful park. It's in Kenya, Lake Nakuru National Park. There's as many lions in there as you would estimate there should be based on the prey. Here's another one in Pinda Private Reserve in South Africa. There's as many lions in there as you'd predict based on the amount of prey. Well, it turns out there's two key factors that show how well the population is faring. First is, if the population is inside a fenced reserve, like Pinda and actually Nakuru, those are both fenced parks, then the population is pretty close or even exceeds what we'd predict based on the amount of food there. That's good in terms of lions. But not many parks in Africa are fenced. Most are unfenced. And where you have unfenced reserves, the only places they're doing reasonably well are when the management budgets are really, really high. Okay? A couple of $1,000s per square kilometer per year. Okay? And some of the key places for lions are huge. There's the Selous Game Reserve. It's 55,000 square kilometers. Its annual budget should be about $110 million. Its actual budget, $5 million. Now, if we look at where the populations are now and what their recent trends have been, we can try to extrapolate, we can try to project in the future whether a population will still be viable, say in the year 2020, 2050, all the way out for the next century. All the fenced populations are doing fine, thank you. Population is near its carrying capacity, or it's growing, it's doing well. So we don't worry about any of the fenced reserves. But the vast majority of parks in Africa are unfenced. Within the next few years, there will only be about 70% that will be viable. And if these trends continue as they have, only about half the unfenced reserves we predict will still be very viable in the next 20 or 30 years. So the trend is bad, okay? And it's in those unfenced reserves. So this leaves us with a really, really big question about the future of the lion. Where's the money? Okay? If you want to fence reserves, there's an initial setup cost. There's about $3,000 per kilometer to set up a fence. It's a lot of money. If you leave them unfenced, well, then you're stuck with a huge management bill every year. Unfenced requires about $2,000 per square kilometer. Okay? Now, a few months ago, trying to get the message out to some people that might potentially pay attention, I wrote an op-ed piece for the Los Angeles Times. And what I was trying to do with that was to emphasize the scale of the challenge. Lion populations that are going to be self-sustaining well into the future need to have large tracts of land. They need to be really well managed. That's going to take a lot of money. It turns out that fencing, once the thing is fenced, is not as expensive per square kilometer, so that might be a reasonable option. Okay? So I emphasized in this the challenge. I mentioned the Selous, which is the size of Switzerland. I mentioned that its budget is only about 5% what it should be to maintain its population if it's not fenced. Okay? What I was trying to do was to give people the heads up that we've all grown up knowing that pandas, tigers, rhinos, they're in terrible shape. Lions are about to join that very unfortunate club. Lions are getting about just as sparse as those other species, and the things that people have been doing so far have not worked. If we're going to reverse the trend, it's going to take a huge amount of money, and it's going to take a lot of imagination to think about things in new ways, including putting fences around some of these reserves that have not so far been fenced. Well, it was a little disappointing that the response from the conservationists to this effort, by my part, was greeted with a lot of anger. And it turns out that fencing is a really controversial topic with a lot of conservationists. And I got this comment: I'd rather see the Serengeti disappear altogether than with a fence around it. And off the record. We have various partners in the Serengeti that have helped us over the years. One of them, and again, I'm not going to use their name here, Major Conservation Agency in Serengeti. Once we published this paper, they withdrew fundraising support for the Lion Project, saying that conservation should only promote the concept of virgin wilderness. Hot damn, virgin wilderness. You're a little late, boys. Here's a map of the Serengeti. This is habitat around the western side of the Serengeti, okay? And yeah, back in the day, the migration of wildebeest used to cross along here. It would go out here in places. This is now cornfields, cotton fields. The amount of habitat that's been lost in the last 20 years is a lot. That's all this red stuff, okay? There's no place for the migration to go out there anymore. Furthermore, we've got tons of pressure coming from that west side. There's 250,000 of livestock that try to come into the Massawa every year and eat the grasslands that's meant for the wildlife. another 70,000 up here. One of my other graduate students has looked at just the meat consumption, the bush meat consumption of people living immediately along the boundary here, just them, okay? There's nearly 1 million people who live along there, and they eat the equivalent of 120,000 wildebeest per year, okay? Now, if that ain't bad enough, the problem is that the human population is growing by 3.5% per year. So if you're not worried yet, just wait a few years, it's going to get dreadful. So, I haven't really enjoyed studying conservation. It's not been that fun. But so, I could still do Snapshot Serengeti, and that could be pretty good, right? Well, unfortunately, US funding for basic research is drying up. I've had 29 years of NSF support for the Serengeti Lion Project, and it ended a month ago. Well, okay, part of my safari. My annual safari takes me home, back to Minneapolis. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota. I live in Minneapolis, and I live in a part of town called Uptown, okay? It's a really nice place. It has the art cinemas, it has lakes, it's great, okay? And as horrible as the last year has been, losing my research clearance, my NSF grant, having everybody mad at me, I walk by in that neighborhood, and from certain angles, when I see that Uptown sign, all I can see is uptoe. Now, there's been this horrible undertow towards bad things happening to lions, to all kinds of issues. And what I realized is we make our own uptoe. It's up to us. We have to do what we can despite whatever else is going on. So, right after we found out about the NSF funding, we went back on the internet. We did a crowdfunding exercise through Indiegogo. We sought to raise $33,000 to keep the Lion Project going for another few months. And we raised over $50,000. That's a big help. Well, lion hunting is a corrupt operation in Tanzania. The corruption is what led to me losing my research clearance, okay? But there's international regulation. And so right now, lions are being considered for listing on the Endangered Species Act, which could actually do more to regulate the bad practices of the trophy hunters than anything else. And I'm now talking to a lot of these people who say they're against fences, and I'm talking with some people who want to build some fences. Well, let's study this. If you guys really don't like fencing, if you'd really rather see the Serengeti disappear than have a fence around it, let's just see how awful a fence would be. Let's put out a section and see what it does. So we're hoping in the next year or so to set out a second Snapshot Serengeti grid, another square kilometers, along that western boundary that's being eaten out by all the people, okay? And then we'll directly measure the effects to see whether the fences are as good as I think they should be or as bad as they think they are. Let's just measure and find out. But otherwise, I think the best thing I can do is to stand up in front of people like you and others and to say, we might have a lot of romantic notions about what should be done to conserve animals, but you've got to be realistic. If you really want to save lions, first you've got to find a huge amount of money. I don't know where that's going to come from, but work on it. And secondly, if it takes a fence, well, it's an ugly thing, but it works. And you should at least consider it as a possibility. And I think one has to keep trying because lions are in the balance, and I hope they'll be with us in the next 100 years. And if you want to learn more about our research and Snapshot, and you want to help us with our classifications, join us. Thank you.